Welcome to HP FanFiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. The first time Harry addressed a Dada class, it was for the new first years in Gryffindor and Ravenclaw. Professor Duncan gave him free rein as to what he taught them, and he took the instruction to heart. Body, mind, spirit, magic. 4 aspects of each of you that make the whole you, he said. For you to reach your peak in any of those areas, you need to reach your peak in all those areas. They are inherently and integrally linked. If you are weak in one, you will be weak in others. And it's not evenly spaced. The body is the physical you. Arms, legs, torso, head. For you to reach your peak in this area, you need to physically exercise. You need to exert yourself and build yourself up. The physically fitter you are, the longer you can cast. The physically fitter you are, the longer you can remain on your feet in battle. The mind is your thought processes and your memories. Studying is the way of exercising the mind. Not surprisingly, the more you study, the more easily the information you study comes to your mind. The more easily you will be able to recall the information from your memories. This helps you to be able to recall wand movement, incantation, the feel of your magic flowing in a specific way, and be able to plan what you're going to do and when in advance. The spirit is the inner you. It drives emotion. It defines your personality. This too can be exercised. One method is meditation. Another, for those who believe in a higher power, is prayer. This is also your determination to win, your determination to push through pain, your desire to win. Finally, magic. One of your textbooks is Magical Theory by Audiobook Waffling. In there, Mr. Waffling tells us magic is like a muscle. It needs exercising. Practicing spell work provides that exercise. It builds magical stamina, control, and power. Many who enjoy physical exercise speak of how, when they're cooling off from that exercise, find they have great clarity of thought. The act of physical exercise can assist them in clearing their minds to allow their thought processes to solve problems more easily than they could before exercising. Hold that thought. Exercising the spirit also does that. That is because, in exercising the spirit, you remove from your mind that which hinders thought. Mediation is the act of allowing yourself to release emotion. In a true mediative state, there is no emotion. When you set the emotion aside, your mind is freer to absorb and process information, and it aids in memory retention. However, the second side of spirit is the emotion, the way you behave. It is what gives you your character. So, we never set aside the emotion permanently. We do, however, when we need to, such as when we're in a battle for our very lives. If you are healthy in body, mind, and spirit, and if you have exercised your magic, you will be the best you can be at that time. You will be a force to be reckoned with. Now, the most powerful tool at your disposal in defending yourself against the dark arts isn't your spell repertoire, it isn't your drive and determination, it isn't your physical fitness. It's your brain and how you use it. In this class, much of what you need to learn is based on how you think. What is the best response when someone casts a spell at you? It depends on what was cast at you. When you see someone casting at you, you have mere moments to think of what you have to do to not be hit by the cast. The quicker you can think, the longer you live. For example, you are faced by a dark wizard who stands 20 feet from you. He casts a purple spell at you. What do you do? Anyone? He asked. The whole class. A Gryffindor raised his hand. Yes? Asked Harry. You put up a shield? The young boy asked. Do you know how to cast a shield? Asked Harry. Well, no, answered the boy. Then you are dead, said Harry. Next. A Ravenclaw this time said, You dive out of the way. With a nod, Harry said, You've dived out of the way and avoid the spell. You live a little longer. Now you're lying on the ground. He casts another spell at you. This one is orange. What do you do? I dive out of the way of that one too, he said, a little too confidently. How? Asked Harry. You're lying on the ground. How do you then dive out of the way? Nope, You're dead too, though. You did live about 3 seconds longer than our brave Gryffindor over here. Keep trying, said Harry. Next, another Ravenclaw, a girl this time. If he's 20 feet away, you should just be able to step to the side. Harry smiled and said, You simply step aside. It uses nowhere near the physical energy to do. It leaves you able to cast back even as you're stepping aside, and it leaves you the ability to dodge his next curse. 5 points to Ravenclaw. However, he's just going to keep casting until he finally tags you and kills you. How do you live through it? You run away, said a Gryffindor. Harry smiled again and said, Yes, 5 points to Gryffindor. But if you just run away, our dastardly dark wizard is just going to shoot you in the back. Dark wizards don't play fair. Think, people, he said. Use what's around you. Use the terrain. Dodge, even when running away. If you're fit, you should be able to dodge and jump from point to point while constantly heading in a direction away from the threat. You can also use big enough objects as physical shields, such as trees, buildings, etc. When you do that, when your moves appear erratic, his chances of hitting you with a cast are greatly diminished. When facing a dark wizard, unless you are an Aurora, a hit wizard, or a specialist unspeakable, your goal is not to defeat the threat, it's to live through it. Quite often that means running away. For that, you need to be physically fit and still retain the wits to do it safely and not stupidly. Any questions? He asked by way of wrapping up. But isn't that the coward's way out? Asked a Gryffindor. No, it's not, replied Harry. You understood you were in a situation you knew you couldn't win, or your chances of winning were very slim, so you retired from the battle. That allows you opportunity to train for the next battle. If you're dead, that's it. He wins, you lose. If you run away and live, you give yourself the opportunity to defeat him next time, or the time after that, or even the time after that. Sometimes, the bravest thing to do is run away. History is littered with the corpses of idiots who were too afraid to run when they should have. Understand? But what about when you faced Riddle? You didn't run away then, and he had all those Death Eaters with him, said one of the Gryffindors. Harry smiled and said, Believe me, if I could have run away, I would have. I'd have been out of there like a bunny rabbit with its little white tail afire. That earned him a few chuckles, as people visualized it. But I couldn't run. Riddle hit me with the Cruciatus curse while I was still tied to his father's headstone. The effect left after that curse is removed leaves all your muscles twitching and feeling as if they're on fire, so I'd been robbed of much of my physical strength. However, I still would have run if given the opportunity. I was then released of my bindings and immediately looked for a way to run away. However, the Death Eaters had closed ranks around us. Then I was hit with the Cruciatus curse for the second time. By the time it was released, I could barely stand, and that's when both mind and spirit come into play. I was still looking for a way to escape, to run away, but I was also aware by that time my rescuers had arrived and were waiting for the opportunity to help me. I then knew my best option to get out of the situation I was in alive, not win, was to give them the chance to rescue me. To do that, I needed to distract Riddle and his masked morons from what was going on around them outside of their circle. In other words, I needed them to focus on me. I was thinking it through. My physical aspect had been harmed, but not my mind, spirit, or magical aspects. I thought about what I needed to do. My mind and spirit helped with that. And then I unleashed with my magic. What happened after that? I'm not permitted to tell you. Sorry. At the end of the class, Harry asked Duncan, What did you think? The man snorted and replied, The lesson it is sometimes braver to run and stay needs to be taught at the academy. I dare say it would save many lives. Harry nodded. At the October General Wizengamot session, after many hours of parchment work and negotiations, the ancient House of Gaunt was finally accorded noble status and lifted it to become the noble and ancient House of Gaunt. This gave Harry his 4th seat in his own right. Both Gryffindor and Slytherin were reactivated while he was away on his honeymoon, and he was accepted into those seats in the September General Session. As he'd discussed with them earlier about heir presumptives, he appointed Amelia as proxy for Gaunt, Sirius as proxy for Slytherin, much to his godfather's displeasure, and added the Gryffindor proxy to the proxy for Potter he gave Gran. Cygnus was sitting as proxy for Dagworth Granger, for Hermione. Spreading them out that way, when he did want to sit a session, he would sit Potter and have the others evenly spread between Amelia, Sirius and Gran. This, at least, saved much of the grumblings coming from the other members. When he received his quarterly extended account statements from Gringotts, he was shocked to see that Bloodfang had worked what Harry considered miracles. The wily old goblin had taken Harry's instruction for the Gaunt, Slytherin and Gryffindor accounts of "go make me money, just don't get me involved in illegal stuff" to heart. As the goblin knew in advance of the ultimate defeat of Riddle, he speculated out the wazoo in the galleon. Then, when the news broke, the value against the other world's currencies climbed significantly for the galleon. He made a market killing. Since then, he'd invested heavily in the worldwide Muggle markets. These were broken across low, medium and high-risk investments, with 50%, 35% and 15% respectively. Across the various portfolios, Harry now owned shares in oil technology, mining and weapons companies, among others. Who, or what, the bloody hell is Stark Industries, he thought, going through the papers. Medium risk, guess I'll keep it, for now. Okay, he thought, getting to the progress reports for the debts being called in. Avery is now probably bankrupt. I wonder why he hasn't announced that yet. Bagman definitely bankrupt and wanted by the goblins for unpaid gambling debts. Deadman walking. Carrow, probably bankrupted. Krebid, paid off with loss of assets. Crouch, paid off with loss of assets. Delahove, bankrupted. Gibbon, paid off. Goyle, paid off. Jugson, paid off with loss of assets. Lestrange, paid off. McNair, bankrupted. Malfoy, paid off. Mulciber, probably bankrupted. Not bankrupted. No wonder the little shit tried to AK me. Ogden, paid off. Parkinson, paid off with loss of assets. Prince, paid off with loss of assets. Rosier, bankrupted. Selwyn, paid off with loss of assets. Snape, paid off with loss of assets. Travers, probably bankrupted. Inbridge, bankrupted. Wilkes, paid off. Yaxley, probably bankrupted. Whoa, he muttered, before he thought, look at all that gold that came flooding in. Thinking about it further, he thought, a list of what happened to each of those houses to Uncle Algy, methinks. That should make his day. Sitting back and giving it more thought, he finally pulled a blank sheet of parchment forth, pulled out his latest fountain pen, and wrote a note to send back to Bloodfang with new instructions. In a nutshell, his instructions were to buy off the bankrupted estates what he could of property. He also gave the instruction to offer delayed sales. That is, buy their personal homes, but allow the current residents to remain within them until they left the property, or died. The property could not be left for another in their estate, however, it could be purchased back if the House of Potter was willing to sell it at market rates. He also instructed the goblin to hide within the sale contract a clause that said, if the resident became a guest of Azkaban for any length of time, it would be considered a change of residence and that they had left the home. At that time he would take possession of it or them, including the contents that existed within the property at that time. He knew the goblin would get a kick out of that. 2 days later, Harry received a response from Bloodfang, where the goblin named him an honorary goblin for his sheer devious business acumen. Thinking about it further, he also sent a list of those families who were bankrupted, possibly bankrupted, or near it, to Cygnus, Sirius, Aunt Amelia, and Gran. He wanted them aware of the change of fortunes of that many families, as it would soon have major repercussions on the Wizengamot. While a noble house could not lose its noble status, and therefore its seat on the Wizengamot, those houses that held a seat but were not noble would be losing those seats if found to be bankrupt. Also, though a noble house could not lose its seat, that seat would be suspended until such time as the bankruptcy was cleared. Further, though 3 house seats of noble status had recently been reactivated, Dagworth Granger, Gryffindor, and Slytherin, plus a new one created, Gaunt, if as many seats would be lost as Harry anticipated, It left vacancies for others to be created to fill the gaps. Harry wanted in on deciding which lucky houses would be given the opportunity. Too many dark houses were given the opportunity after the previous war, and members of those houses were more than likely to have been part of the cause of those vacancies existing in the first place, as they were of Death Eaters who wiped out the original families. Two such lost houses were Mackinnon and Prewitt. Mackinnon was wiped out unless Isabel and Monica could find a witch or wizard recently born of a squib of the line. As for the Prewitts, which they knew of, there was Molly Weasley nigh Prewitt and Mafalda Prewitt. Mafalda had recently been sorted into Slytherin, much to the Weasleys' collective dismay, so they'd ignored her. She was the daughter of a Prewitt squib, an accountant. However, if Mafalda ends up not marrying with a betrothal contract with a line continuation clause in it, the Prewitt name would be considered dead. This was another family Isabel and Monica were tracing, and were considering talking to the girl's father to take her in for the primogeniture test with the goblins, even if it would really annoy the current Weasley family's screaming banshee matriarch. If necessary, Harry would play hardball with her and remind her of the time Ginny's life was saved. Finding out Hermione was the rightful heir of Dagworth Granger was a fluke. They knew that now, while Monica's computer had as much information within its databases as they could pour into it, they had not yet found any further rightful heirs for noble houses, but they had not given up hope. Instead, they were also looking for information from the wizarding communities of Magical America and Magical Australiana, combined Australia and New Zealand, but had, so far, met headaches in trying to get their recent census results. Those two nations were the top two for émigrés from Magical Britain. In a meeting in the Longbottom office preceding the October Wizengamot session, Gran and Aunt Amelia raised why the work of Isabel and Monica was so important to them. There was a legal loophole in the rules regarding the formation of that august body that allowed the minister to put toadies in as heads of departments. As each department head plus the senior undersecretary also had a position on the Wizengamot due to their position, it allowed the current minister to slowly but surely create for him or herself a significant voting bloc of 8 members who owed their positions and seats to him or her. Gran, with Aunt Amelia's support, had been trying to strip away the voting rights of those department heads, yet allow them to remain on the Wizengamot as advisors, only, however, they had not a chance of having the votes to bring that to a successful conclusion. Now, though, they were finally getting there. When Harry pulled the proxies away from Dumbledore's supporters, he pulled them away from those who would have voted against the motion and gave them to people who would. That was a change of 4 votes, 2 lost from the votes against and 2 added to the votes for. Next, the activation of the seat for Dagworth Granger gave them another, the activation of Gryffindor and Slytherin gave them another 2, and the activation of Gaunt would give them yet another, a total change of 8 votes. Minister Dirk Creswell had turned out to be a decent man. He wasn't one to bluster or dither, and he didn't seem to be one to accept bribes. Harry was quite happy to reactively support the man. However, he wasn't going to use his fame to proactively support him unless he ended up in a race for the position against someone Harry despised when the next elections approached. With the minister's support, that would possibly cause a voting fracture within the heads of department to possibly swing 1 or 2 across from the nays to the yays. Merlin, I hate politics, he thought. It was why he was so eager to hand off the proxies. As they headed towards Christmas, Harry and Daphne became more in tune with Harry's new responsibilities and their status as a married couple. The group had moved their study area from the come-and-go room to the study area Harry had created within the suites. As a professor, Harry was also able to write after-curfew hall passes for those sessions that didn't end until after curfew, so their friends were able to head back to their common rooms without facing point losses or detentions. However, shortly after the group had broken up for the night, one night, and he and Daphne were about to ready themselves for bed, he received a warning from the castle's portraits that Luna had been attacked not far from the Ravenclaw Tower. Barefoot, he raced out of their bedroom, grabbed his firebolt, and took off out the Griffin portrait, mounting his broom as he went. He entered the grand staircase and shot up the void, dodging an already moving flight as he went. He hit the 6th floor and shot along the corridor. In the corridor, immediately before the one he was told Luna was in, he brought the broom to an almost rump-sliding halt, hopped off and popped his wand into his hand. He calmly walked around the corner, leaving his broom hovering next to the wall before the corner. He saw Draco Malfoy, Pansy Parkinson, and the bookends as they dragged a kicking Luna into one of the vacant classrooms on that floor. They didn't see him as they entered, pulling the door shut behind them. With his magic swirling, he stormed up the corridor. Once at the door, he tried to open it and found it locked and warded. Backing up, he cast an overpowered reductor curse at the door, reducing it to sawdust, and immediately stormed in. The two bookends were holding an arm each of Luna and had her pulled over onto her back on a desk. Malfoy was standing between her legs, undoing his belt. The only immediate threat was Parkinson. He cast a full-body bind curse at her, causing her to go stiff as a board and topple over with a look of surprise on her face. He started with a summoning charm on Malfoy as he reached for his wand, and his pants fell down around his ankles, followed by a banishing charm to slam him into the opposite wall. The two bookends were hit with stunners. Turning back to Malfoy, he levitated the boy off the floor from where he was panicking and trying to scramble to his feet before banishing him back at the wall and sticking him there with a full-body, sticking charm. Crying her heart out, Luna was struggling up off the table. He immediately moved to her and wrapped her in his arms. "Easy, dear Luna," he spoke to her in soothing tones. "I'm here. I promised I would protect you, and here I am." She sobbed her heart out and shivered as the adrenaline within her system started to burn off. While she cried, Harry started to think of how he was going to handle this whole mess. Once it appeared she was almost calmed, he gently picked her up in bridal carry and carried her from the room. At the doorway, he cast a wide-area stasis charm on the room and a wizard notice me not charm on the doorway, so passing students or staff would not find it. Returning to his broom, he mounted it and had Luna ride behind him as he gently rode the broom back down to the owner's suites. He even rode the broom through the opened portrait hole and up into their study area. There they were met with both Daphne and Tracy. Both were worried but relieved to see him and Luna enter, even if it was while riding a broom. Asking the girl to hop off, she was immediately wrapped in the arms of both Daphne and Tracy, eliciting yet further sobs from their younger Ravenclaw friend. "She's staying here tonight," said Harry. "For at least tonight." "What happened?" asked Tracy. "Malfoy, with the help of Crabbe, Goyle, and Parkinson, He tried, but stuttered. "He was about to rape me," sobbed Luna. Daphne and Tracy both hissed in shock. "She's staying with me for tonight," said Tracy. She turned to Luna and asked, "Do you want to sleep with me?" Luna hesitated for a moment before she carefully nodded her head. Then, "It's decided," said Tracy with an air of finality. "Maisie," called Daphne. With a slight pop, the little elf appeared. "Yes, mistress." Looking back, Daphne said, "Maisie, I need you to go to the Ravenclaw fourth-year girls' dorm, pack Miss Lovegood's property for her, and put it in Miss Tracy's room. Can you do that for me?" "Yes, mistress," curtsied the elf before it popped away. "Settled and done," said Daphne. "Come," said Tracy to Luna. "We'll cuddle and talk." She led the still upset girl by the hand down through the interconnecting passage as Daphne turned to Harry. "All right, what have you done with Malfoy and his cohorts?" she asked in an ominous voice. "They're still in the room in which they tried to hurt Luna. They're under a wide-area stasis charm and the door is hidden," he sighed. "I know what I want to do to them. But what do I actually do?" She sighed. "Let's think this through." The next morning, the student population was required to be in the Great Hall at 8:30 a.m. for a special announcement. No one who knew why was talking, and those who didn't were just curious. At 8:30 a.m., Harry stood to make his announcement. This was something he'd already worked out with both Headmaster Flitwick and Deputy Headmistress McGonagall. Standing before them all, he soon had silence. "Last night, one of our own was attacked within our home, Hogwarts. The attack was carried out by another 4 of our own. Their attack was planned in advance. Their attack was meant to be one of gang rape. That shocked them." Harry allowed them to talk among themselves for a few moments before he continued. "However, What they fail to consider is that this castle is mine. As I've informed you all before, I am Lord of the Manor. The castle ultimately answers to me. It was designed from the ground up to protect you. It was built at a time when the founders were concerned for the safety of their students. So certain magics were imbued into the very walls. There is a reason Hogwarts is considered the safest place in magical Britain. And it's not just its wards. Last night, shortly after curfew, I was alerted by Hogwarts of an attack taking place on the 6th floor near the Ravenclaw Tower entrance. The 4 culprits lay in wait for a 5th, a young female Ravenclaw student. Their plan was to ambush her, drag her into a nearby unused classroom, and rape her. The 4 laying in ambush were Slytherin students. They had no other reason to be where they were. In other words, this was clearly a premeditated attack. When I arrived on the scene of the second part of the crime after the initial attack and in the unused classroom, they had the young female Ravenclaw student bent backwards over a desk. 2 of them held her arms out and down, effectively pinning her to the desk, while she struggled mightily and under effects of a silencing charm. A third, a female, believe it or not, was maliciously whispering in the young Ravenclaw's ear an in-depth description of just what they were planning to do to her. The 4th was between our victim's legs and was dropping his trousers, ready to carry out this heinous deed. His penis erect. He could see the effect his words were having on the students. Many were clearly angry. Some were visibly upset. Some just sat in stunned shock. A few looked positively murderous. "Here are the perpetrators," he said, before turning to the wall behind the Slytherin table, between the top end of that and the head table, and cancelling the invisibility charm he'd cast on the wall much earlier that morning. Cancelling the charm showed all 4 pinned spread eagle to the wall with their feet at least 3 feet off the floor. He then revived them but left them silenced by a tongue-locking charm. They could hear and they could make a little noise, but they could not speak. My initial reaction was simply to execute them, and to do it publicly, he flatly said. The law is on my side in this. As both Lord Slytherin and Lord Gryffindor, it is my right to do so when such heinous crimes are committed within these walls against our students. Looking at them, he could see they'd clearly hurt him. Malfoy was looking murderous. Crabbe and Goyle were looking confused. But Parkinson understood just how much trouble she was in, and had wet herself. Harry banished the puddle that formed on the floor below her. "However, my lovely wife fears what effect this would have on me, as a person," he said, turning back to the students. "Through her wise counsel, I have decided not to carry out the deed. Myself, I shall hand them to the DMLE, where I will demand their immediate incarceration until their trials. I will also consider sitting on the trial panel, and when they are found guilty of their crimes, I have no doubt of that, I will be asking for their executions, as per the law for crimes of this nature." That was the cue for Madam Bones and 6 Auras, 4 men and 2 women, to enter through the double doors. "Ah," he said, noticing them. "Madam Bones, good to see you. Your perpetrators are hanging about." He gestured to the 4, "just over there for you." It was only because he had gotten to know her so well that Harry noticed the little twitch of her cheek that showed she was struggling not to smile back. "Would you mind letting them down so my auras can cuff them and take them away?" she wryly asked. "Certainly," he replied. "But first," he walked over to stand about 6 feet short of them, and looked up at the 4. "For crimes against the noble and ancient house of Slytherin, you are hereby banished from the house." A quick wave of his wand and all Slytherin paraphernalia affixed to their robes and underclothing was stripped away, leaving them in plain Hogwarts robes. "For crimes against Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, you are hereby expelled from the school and grounds," he continued, and all crests on their ties disappeared, leaving them in plain robes. "As you are now currently unschooled, and as you have not yet passed even 1 ODL each, as per the law, you are hereby banned from using any magic whatsoever until such time as you again enter formal education. Though I very much doubt that is ever likely to occur. For crimes against other students, crimes so foul as to warrant your execution, you are hereby remanded into the custody of the DMLE. There you shall abide until such time as the conclusion of your trials." He then waved his wand, releasing all charms placed upon them. All four dropped to the ground. The three boys remained on their feet. However, Miss Parkinson dropped to her knees and bum, sobbing her eyes out. The 6 Auras stepped forward and quickly affixed anti-magic cuffs to the 4 of them. Harry looked at Aunt Amelia and drew 4 wands from his pocket. "They're wands, madam," he said. When she accepted them and, as she was dropping all 4 into an evidence bag, he reached in and withdrew 2 small phials, offering them to her. "And these are the memories of the young witch victim and myself of the events." Again, with the twitch, Aunt Amelia accepted the 2 phials and dropped them into a pocket of her own robes. Turning to her auras, she said, "Take them back to the DMLE and dump them in 4 individual holding cells." The 6 headed out with their prisoners. Turning back to Harry, she gave a small bow and said, "Lord Potter Gaunt Slytherin, Gryffindor." "Good morning," before she turned to Headmaster Flitwick, who had a grim expression on his face. "Headmaster," she said with the same bow. Then she turned about and stalked out after her auras. After she'd left, Harry said to the students, "Unlike Professor Dumbledore, Headmaster Flitwick and I recognize a crime for what it is, a crime and not children just acting out. If you commit a crime within these grounds, you will be held accountable for them." Harry held their collective gazes for a moment more before turning to the headmaster. "Headmaster, they're yours," and he walked over off to the side. Professor Flitwick stood in place on his seat and looked out across the students. "As you have witnessed, the days of you only receiving a point loss and detentions for crimes committed are well and truly over. Remember that. Classes resume at 9:00 a.m. in a little over 10 minutes from now. Don't be late." And he sat down again. Many students used that opportunity to rise and head to class. Others remained a little longer to chat among themselves. Back in their suite, Harry drew Daphne into a hug. "I may not have liked the little shit or his friends, but that still didn't mean I wanted him dead," he said. "No," she replied, "but he has well and truly earned his execution. He, especially, has been heading that way since I've known him." "Yes, but the others," he sighed. "The 2 bookends are too stupid to know any better, and I think Parkinson only behaved the way she did due to the betrothal contract between her and the amazing bouncing ferret. And if that is the case, it should all come out in trials," she argued back. "Come," she said, stepping away from him and taking him by the hand. "Tracy and Luna are in the kitchen, sitting around the dining table," and led him into the other room. When they walked in, Tracy asked, "Well?" The 4 of them were led away in cuffs. "A short while ago," he said, "but before they were led away, I kicked them out of Slytherin, and then kicked them out of the school. They will never return. I'll make sure of that." "Good," Tracy firmly said. "And good riddance." 2 days later, Harry attended the trial. Again, as it pertained to one event, all 4 were tried together. Malfoy was sent through the veil, physically tossed through, really kicking and screaming. His sentence was on his own words. "The blood traitor should have welcomed my attention. A good fucking is all she's good for." Sirius immediately claimed the estates of the House of Malfoy and ended the line. He welcomed Narcissa back into the Black family as Narcissa Black on probation. Malfoy Manor, originally Black Manor until it became part of the dowry of Narcissa to House Malfoy, was returned to its name of Black Manor. Sirius went through it with a fine-tooth comb and found a hidden section below the basement. He never told Harry what he found. Down there, he'd just say it both horrified and sickened him, and leave it at that. All dark arts stuff he found, he destroyed of the personal property of both recent male Malfoys. He allowed Narcissa to take what mementos she wanted. She only took a little stuffed animal toy and a baby blanket that was Draco's when he was an infant. Everything else was burned on the same fire. Sirius used to destroy much of what he'd found below the manor and Malfoy family portraits. He claimed back the Black family portraits. For their own roles, the other 3 were sent to minimum security, Dementor-free, in Azkaban for 5 years each. Pansy hung herself a month later using her prisoner's robes and the bars on her cell. It was Christmas Day. Harry blocked any mention of it from the Daily Prophet's publications, and Luna had no interest in publishing it either. Vincent Crabbe and Gregory Goyle were released at the conclusion of their sentences. Their mothers, who had already left magical Britain by then, immediately took them to live abroad. They were not heard from again. With the Slytherin Four, as they became known, gone from Hogwarts, everyone's spirits seemed to lift. People now walked the halls, confident in their security within the castle. The Slytherins and Gryffindors still occasionally almost came to spellfire. However, it only ever amounted to threats and posturing, and only ever with the older years. The Weasley twins pranking backed right off, too. They were in their new 80 year and knew they had to knuckle down and do well. Their future as proprietors of Weasley's Wizarding Wheezes demanded it, and they knew it. Harry was unsure whether or not to head home to Potter Manor for Christmas. Hogwarts was also their home, now more so than ever, but Daphne demanded it, and Daphne got what she wanted. The trip home on the Hogwarts Express on the 22nd of December was a relaxing journey for the group. Others from among the years received invitations to join them. Now that Harry had finally got it through some very mullish heads that the owner's carriage was his, he allowed others to come and visit. On the way home for Christmas, as soon as the train left the platform at Hogsmeade, he wandered down the length of the train from back to front, looking to see who was sitting where. On the way back, as a treat, he offered those who were sitting lone the opportunity to join him in the owner's carriage for the entire trip. They all accepted. However, there was only 5. By way of further apology to Astoria, he'd been doing a lot of that since the shovel incident. He also invited her and Colin to join them. Colin was even allowed to take photographs of the interior of the carriage so long as he asked first, and Harry could clear out the students to the other end while Colin took the photographs. The photographs he took ended up published in the Quibbler in a special Christmas article about the founders. They joined photographs he had taken of the modified owner's suites in the castle. There was even one of Harry sitting at his desk in his office in the old Slytherin Sweet Potions lab, with Daphne perched on the edge of the desk. Harry asked for and received a 5x7 copy of the photograph. He kept it in a gold frame on the same desk shown in the photograph. Yes, the newlyweds, as that was what they still considered themselves to be, spent Christmas at Potter Manor. However, that was just their home base for the extra-long Christmas break. The two spent time at Greengrass Estate, the Black House, which Sirius now preferred to be his home, rather than the reacquired Black Manor. A night at Dagworth Granger Manor, and visits with the Davises, the Boneses, and the Longbottoms. Luna joined them overnight, twice, and the twins once. The two blew off the Ministry Yule Ball, and Harry was scolded for it in his own paper. He grumbled about it, but couldn't smack them down for it, as it was the truth, without spin. "You know this means we'll have to go next year, right?" he asked Daphne, after reading the article to her over breakfast. She sighed and said, "I know." Perking up a bit, she said, "Maybe we'll get lucky and something'll happen that'll get it cancelled." With a snort, Harry said, "It would have to be something really big to do that." They still held the annual Yule Balls during the war with Voldemort. Finally, the break ended, and on the 12th of January, they were once more on the Hogwarts Express steaming back to southern Scotland. This time, with Daphne's suggestion, they brought with them Monty Wordsworth. They were using the trip to give him a long interview of the current life of one Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the young man who conquered, Basilisk Slayer, Lord of 4 noble and ancient houses, doting husband. It was the last title he was most proud of. From Monty he also learned why the Ministry was most unhappy with him. On the night, they had wanted to award him the Order of Merlin, First Class, for his defeat of Riddle Voldemort. "I do not believe I would have accepted it," he said when told. "I believe my mother should have been awarded it due to her actions on the night of the 31st of October 1981. She killed Riddle that night, not me. She well and truly earned one, even if it would have been posthumously." And, to top it off, they awarded a 3rd class to Pettigrew, supposedly posthumously, for just supposedly being there, the one later proven to have been their betrayer. No, I think I would have refused it. There are others in the queue before me who haven't been awarded theirs yet. Let them be awarded first. Then the minister can come and talk to me about it, instead of trying to surprise me with it." "And how are you handling your myriad of duties?" asked Monty. "4 lordships, overall management of Hogwarts, studying for your OWLs, and recently married makes for a very busy schedule. I have a loving family, understanding and assisting friends, a very understanding and knowledgeable headmaster, and a wife who is my partner in all things," he said. "Plus, I have a clever and hard-working master account keeper in Gringotts and a very smart lawyer to look after a lot of the financials. About Hogwarts, you sacked the school board and replaced them with people of your own choosing. The school board of governors, once I took up my Slytherin and Gryffindor lordships, became superfluous, redundant. With me taking the helm, there was no longer a need for governors, so I shut down the board," he replied. "However, I felt I still needed advisors, so I appointed my lawyer, Mr. Dewey Scrokim, to my board of advisors as legal counsel. My main proxy on the Wizengamot, Dowager Lady Augusta Longbottom, for her depth of knowledge in the legislative field and in managing the affairs of an ancient house. Lady Isabel Greengrass, for her knowledge and experience in dealing with the Muggle world, and the Goblin Bloodfang for his understanding and expertise in finance, for dealing with the financial situation of the school. There's also a 5th individual I'm hoping can make himself available, but I've not heard back from him his decision yet." "That second last one created a ruckus," said Monty. "Many didn't like the idea of you having a goblin on your board of advisors." "Tough," snapped Harry. "While others might have an idiotic view of whom and what is best, you cannot go past the goblins for having the best financial advisors there are. Master Bloodfang is doing such a fantastic job of overseeing the financials of the school. We may soon be able to consider dropping fees for students, and that's after I've already spent over 100,000 galleons modernizing books, equipment and plant life within the school. No other financial advisor has accomplished that before him. Of course, if people actually want to pay more in school fees, I'll be happy to accommodate them. As for the financials, the school's coffers were in a deplorable state, and they got that way under the guardianship of the governors and previous headmasters. From my own funds, almost the very first thing I did was pour a significant amount of money into the funds for Hogwarts. This has allowed the headmaster to replace the dangerous school brooms, replace worn-out furniture and fittings, repopulate the greenhouses, hire more staff, provide better pay for all staff, provide opportunities for staff to further their own learning, purchase more and up-to-date books for the school library, and quite a few other things. The interview went almost for the entire trip. Monty left directly for the offices of the Daily Prophet from Hogsmeade Station with reams of parchment filled out by a dicta quill. If not for Frosty keeping them supplied with tea and butterbeers, Harry's voice would have been reduced to a croak by the time they were finished. Back into studying, and Harry was finding his days filled with study, teaching, study, admin for his houses, admin for the school, study, the odd staff meetings, working on assignments, and study. Things had degenerated to the point where he was cutting classes short or not attending them at all. He just thanked God for his eidetic memory. He knew he'd not pass his OWLs without it, or at least not get his usually high grades. It was Neville who finally dragged him aside about it. "Harry, mate," he began, "you cannot keep going like this." "What else am I supposed to do, Nev?" he asked back, a little short. "Some things have to go," said the other boy. "Hand over the financials of the houses to Dewey. He can work with Bloodfang on your behalf. And now that you've got yourself a great team of advisors, instead of that corrupt school board, stop directly managing them and let them be somewhat autonomous in dealing with the financials of the school. Just ask for a report from them once in a while. I'd also suggest you give up being an adjunct professor in Dada, but I can see how much you actually enjoy that. So keep that, and just your studies. Everything else must go." Harry put his quill down and leaned back in his chair. He raised both hands and let his fingers scratch through his scalp while he thought. Finally, he rocked back forward again. With a sigh, he said, "You're right, Nev, you're right." "I know," smiled the other boy. "I just hoped you'd see I was." Harry blew him a raspberry. "All right," he said. "How do we go about this?" "Arrange a meeting with Dewey, but tell him what you want to do in advance, Nev replied. Next, call a meeting of the advisors, ask the headmaster to attend, and stay only long enough to inform them of what you're doing. Easy peasy. Yeah, it really is that simple, isn't it? He said. And it's precisely what he did. Only a week later, the majority of his work disappeared from his needed attention. He was able to spend more time with Daphne and his friends, and he was able to attend his classes, with the exception of those he was occasionally teaching. As an apology to Daphne for not paying as much attention to her as he thought he should, he took her to come-and-go room for a romantic dinner for two. This time, it was as a scene from a top-floor restaurant looking across Sydney Harbour, the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and the Sydney Opera House completely lit up. After Harry had apologised yet again, Daphne said, "I keep telling you, Harry, you've nothing to apologise for. It's not as if you were slacking off or anything. You were working hard for our future. I'm just glad Neville was able to get through to you that you needed to step back from managing so many things at once. You were beginning to get quite short-tempered." "I'm sorry." "Hush," she snapped. "Things are better now. Now you just have to keep it that way." He nodded in response, afraid she'd just shut him up again. After a few minutes, she asked, "Did you know both Hermione and Susan now have boyfriends?" Harry looked up a little startled. No, I didn't." She nodded and said, "Hermione's seeing a boy in our year, a Justin Finch Fletchley." "Oh," said Harry, instantly recalling what he knew of the boy. He was one of the first petrified by the basilisk. We shared workstations for potions. Third year, he was also down for Eton, pretty posh private school that when he received his Hogwarts letter, by the way he talks and the posh inflection of his voice and how his parents were dressed when they visited him in the infirmary where he was unpetrified, it looks like his family's well-to-do. Daphne nodded. "According to Hermione, his grandfather is supposed to be an earl or something." "But what's he like as a person away from classes?" asked Harry. "From the few times I've met him, he's quite nice. He's a gentleman with Hermione and us other ladies, and he's helped us out with the etiquette club." "Okay, cool," said Harry. "And who's Susan seeing?" "Eddie Carmichael in Ravenclaw." Harry looked up, a little startled. "Really?" he almost squeaked. "Really?" she smirked. "Huh?" said Harry, settling back. "I would have thought she'd take up with someone like Diggory or Michael Corner." Giving her head a little shake, she said, "No, Diggory's back to seeing Cho, even though he's now graduated, and Corner's dating Ginny Weasley." "Well, if both girls are still dating them, once finish our eau de Biels, I'll have to tell them both to invite their boyfriends into the owner's carriage." "I was hoping you'd say that," she smiled, "because I've already told both of them exactly that. So, if things work out for them, that leaves Luna as the only one single," shrugged Harry. "All right, then." As they headed towards their actual eau de Belle exams, Harry was finally able to finish the squib wand he was working on. With Filch's assistance, he finally got it working. It took many more wands before he eventually got a good enough match, but it worked. As he'd promised to let the old caretaker keep the wand, Filch even demonstrated using it in the Ancient Runes class before Professor Babbling, and promised to demonstrate it during Harry's eau de Bilal practical for the subject. His career advice talk in early May with the Nest Mother, as they'd come to call the Ravenclaw head of house, Madam Smithson, was quick. Harry's career would be supporting his wife and taking a more active interest in the Wizengamot and administering Hogwarts. Both Potters also took apparition classes when Wilkie Twycross came to the school. Both passed and sat their exam at the ministry to get their apparition licenses. While Harry hated sidelong apparition, he felt apparating himself didn't feel so bad. He thought it might have something to do with how he was in control. What was surprising for others, but Harry already suspected was the case, was that he and Daphne were both able to apparate within the school and through the school wards. The eau de Belles were as difficult as Harry expected them to be. However, he was able to answer all the questions and went for the bonuses in every subject. In Ancient Runes, Filch demonstrated the wand, and Harry described how and why it worked. In arithmancy, he described how 7 was supposedly a magical number and demonstrated what he thought were improvements on the initial theory. In charms, he not only made legs appear on a teacup, he had it performing a soft shoe shuffle and a tap dance. Then he followed it up with his overpowered patroness. However, when he entered for his practical for Dada, the examiners took on look at him and said, "Forget it, Lord Potter. You took out a Dark Lord a year ago, and you're currently teaching in the subject. Should your theory work be up to snuff, and we dare say we know it will be, we're giving you an au plat for the subject. You may leave." Exams finally finished on Thursday, the 18th of June. From then on, until they caught the Hogwarts Express back to London on the Sunday, their time was their own. Arranged in advance, the group had a party to celebrate in the living room area of the suites. The next morning, Harry came down from his and Daphne's master bedroom to find Justin and Eddie sleeping on 2 couches down in the living room area. But where were Neville and Blaise? Then his eyes widened. Tracy had her own room down on the bottom level. He suspected the twin rooms were where he'd find Hermione and Susan. Looking at the ceiling, he thought Luna might be in one of the ex-kitchen bedrooms and Hannah in the other, with Neville. Grinning, he dashed into his office and ducked across to the map. Looking about it, he found what he was looking for. Yes, Blaise was in with Tracy lying side by side. Luna was in with Susan, with Hermione in the other bed. That meant Neville and Hannah were in separate rooms in the ex-kitchen bedrooms. So the only ones getting up to any hanky-panky last night was Tracy and Blaise, he thought. Chuckling to himself, he went back up to the kitchen and had Maisie prepare him something. A couple of minutes after he sat down, Daphne joined him just as Hedwig came flying in through the window. A kiss for the wife and couple of pieces of bacon for the familiar, plus a couple of soft strokes of her feathers, and he was reading the Prophet. Now that the two had taken up residence in the suites, both Hedwig and Midnight, Daphne's cat, had also taken up residence. Harry would sometimes enjoy a late-night snack, and he'd often have Midnight wanting up onto his lap or jumping onto the arm of his chair in the expectation he'd share with her. The old softy he was, he would. However, Midnight would often prove to be a pain in the bum when he was trying to work at his desk. She'd always want up on the desk, and as soon as she was, she'd want to play with his quill feather. He'd eventually trained her to snuggle down into a cat basket on the ledge of the window in the warm rays of the sun, where she could watch him and be patted to save on destroyed quills. Hedwig's stand was close by for the same reason. "I noticed Eddie and Justin crashed on the couches. Out there," she said. "Who spent the night here?" "Everyone," Harry smirked. He watched her frown as she got that look she adopted when she was thinking hard about something and trying to solve a problem or puzzle. When he saw her eyes open wide, he snickered. "Neville and Hannah?" she asked. "Nope," he replied. "Neville and Hannah are in separate beds in the 2 new bedrooms directly above us." "Tracy and Blaise?" she asked. "Yep, together, in her bed," he replied with a smirk. "Okay," she mused. "That just leaves the twin bedroom of Salazar's old master bedroom. That would mean Susan, Hermione, and Luna are in those 2 beds." "Correct," he said with a grin. She gave a snort. "As Susan went to bed first and Hermione second, I'd say Luna just walked in and jumped into bed with Susan. Luna knows that Susan and Hannah used to cuddle up together, so wouldn't have hesitated to cuddle up to Sue." With another snort, she said, "Sue's going to be ever so surprised. Luna likes to sleep in the nude." "I know," he sniggered. "She told me. We need more rooms. With the break effectively starting tomorrow, I'm going to come back sometime early next week and see if I can find the entrance to the Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw suites. I have a feeling they're probably right alongside the entrances to Gryffindor and Slytherin. And if they are, I'm going to see if I can get the elves to link them through like I've done with these 2. People started rising and making their way to where Daphne and Harry were sitting at the dining table in the kitchen, eating their breakfasts. As each came in, they were greeted with a good morning but generally ignored. Maisie and Frosty enjoyed serving them all. When Blaise and Tracy turned up, Harry smirked at them. "Have fun, you 2. Tracy blushed while Blaise puffed up a little and said, "I had a most pleasant evening, yes." "Glad to hear it," smiled Harry. "Just remember the shovel." The shovel? Asked Blaise. Harry grinned. Allow me to give the shovel talk. Harry, growled Daphne. Anyways, said Harry, quick to change the subject. The twins didn't stay long. As they've now finished their education, they're not even staying for the train ride back to London. They walked out the front gate and apparated directly to their new business premises. Eager to get started? Asked Hannah. Definitely, replied Harry. From their market research, they know that the 2 periods they'll make most of their profit is during the summer break and during the lead up to Christmas. Daphne cut in. So they've gone to get everything set up as quick as they can in the few days they've got before the train heads back to London. Once students are back home, their store is going to get real crowded real fast. Good luck to them, said Blaise. With the school year over, and another trip home of the Hogwarts Express, Harry and Daphne apparated from the platform to Potter Manor. Of course, the house elves were ecstatic to have them home. After a couple of days sorting out any problems, both then apparated into the owner's suite back at Hogwarts. That is just so cool, he chuckled. Daphne just gave him an amused smirk. At least you don't faceplant anymore. Hey, he mock-pouted. I told you, the flu system and portkeys hate me. They exited out through the Griffin portrait and had a better look at the full corridor in which they stood. All right, he said. Pointing, he indicated, up there is the Gryffindor living room. Directly above us is the Gryffindor master bedroom. Moving along to where the Slytherin door was, he indicated again. Down there is the Slytherin family room level, which, if my personal measurements are reasonably accurate, means my office and the armory is under the Gryffindor kitchen and half bathroom. And the Slytherin master and guest bedroom is directly under our feet. Is that what you think? Nodding, Daphne said. That's about what I worked out too. Good. I also think we should find the Ravenclaw suite next in a similar layout to the Gryffindor suites, then the Hufflepuff suites in a similar layout to Slytherin, he explained, indicating the whole way. Or Hufflepuff will be next to Gryffindor, and then Ravenclaw next to Hufflepuff. Looking at the length of the corridor and thinking about what of the layout they already knew, Daphne said, There's a third option, one I think is more likely. He asked. There's really insufficient space for them both to be, as we're standing to the right of Slytherin, she explained. The same for them to be to the left of Gryffindor. Further, Hufflepuff would want to be closest to the infirmary, so I think we'll find Hufflepuff to the left of Gryffindor and Ravenclaw to the right of Slytherin. Nodding, Harry said. Then, let's check. Both headed to the area of wall left of Gryffindor and found a portrait of a close-up scene of a forest. The frame went almost to the floor. Definitely Hufflepuff, muttered Harry. He looked further along for any sign Ravenclaw's chambers would be there, but couldn't find anything. Walking back down the corridor, they passed by Slytherin's door and began their search. Sure enough, they found a small alcove with an eagle similar to the one that guarded the Ravenclaw Tower entrance. Well, you're right, he said. The third option looks like the winner. She said. But how do we get into them? He smiled at her and said, by the same way we now bypass the Slytherin entrance, and in a connecting passage. Understanding, her eyes lit up. Oh, of course. Re-entering the Gryffindor living room, Harry called Frosty. Yes, my lord? Asked the elf, popping in. Hiya, he said. Am I correct in believing the Hufflepuff suite is next to us here? Yes, my lord, replied the elf. Excellent. Can you create a passage similar to the one that goes from here to the Slytherin suite, but have it go from here to the Hufflepuff suite? Yes, my lord, replied Frosty. If you wish. I do, said Harry. Make it happen, please. Very well, my lord, the elf replied before seeming to stare off into the distance a bit. Harry and Daphne both felt that subaudible groan, and another door appeared matching the one to the Slytherin suite. Let's go check it out, shall we? He smiled at Daphne. Together they descended the interconnecting stairs to the Hufflepuff suite. As expected, as soon as they stepped into the living room, a house elf appeared. My lord, it asked, why is you here? With no current rightful heir for Hufflepuff, and as I'm the only recognized owner of Hogwarts, I'll be making use of this suite until a rightful heir of the Hufflepuff line presents themselves. At that time, the suite will be returned to them. The elf appeared to consider that for a moment before she said, Then welcome, my lord and lady. I am Wispy. I am responsible for this suite. Hello then, Wispy, replied Harry. As you know, I am Lord Gryffindor, and Slytherin. Gesturing to Daphne, he said, and this is Lady Gryffindor and Slytherin. How about you show us around and we'll see what we can do to modernize this place, Wispy showed them through the suite. As expected, it was very similar to the layout of the Slytherin suite. The main differences were the extra-large potions lab and much smaller armory, and only one bedroom similar in size to the Gryffindor master. However, things were switched about. The potions lab and armory were on the right and the kitchen was on the left. The stairs leading down to the bedroom were also on the other side of the stairs leading back up to the corridor. Back in the living room, Harry looked at the back wall of the small armory and asked Wispy, "Is the Slytherin armory on the other side of this wall?" "Oh, yes, my lord," she said. "Well, well," said Harry, turning to Daphne, "that's going to make it easier. You're thinking of putting a door through there, aren't you?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "The connecting stairs go through to the Gryffindor suite. A door through here will go through to the Slytherin suite, into the storage room there. They're both on the same level. And I'm pretty sure we'll find the Gryffindor and Ravenclaw suites on the same level one floor up. They're just offset from being directly atop each other. Except the master bedrooms of Gryffindor and Ravenclaw next to each other directly above the outside corridor. And Hufflepuff and Slytherin next to each other directly below the outside corridor," said Daphne. "That's actually quite a clever design." "Yeah," said Harry. "Now we just have to confirm it by going to the Slytherin suite and asking for internal stairs leading up to the Ravenclaw suite. Shall we?" Smirking, Daphne replied, "We shall." The two went up the new internal stairs back to the Gryffindor suite, before taking the first internal stairs down to the Slytherin suite. In the living room, Harry called Frosty. "Again." "My lord?" asked the elf, popping in. "Frosty, I think the Ravenclaw suite is next along the line, is it not?" asked Harry. "It is, my lord," the elf replied. "In? Same thing as last time, please," instructed Harry. "An internal connection between here and the Ravenclaw suite, if you would." "At once, my lord," replied the elf. Another short period where the elf looked to be staring off into the distance, another sub-audible groan, and another appearing door. Grinning, this time Daphne led Harry up the flight of stairs into the Ravenclaw suite. The house elf in this suite introduced himself as Puddles. This time, the suite mimicked the Gryffindor suite, but was also flipped so that the back walls of the potions labs and armories backed onto one another. However, Ravenclaw already had a library where the armory was in Gryffindor, so it was not going to be much to have an interconnecting door through the back wall there. It meant the two libraries would be connected, which made things a lot easier. Now the two needed to decide what they were going to do with all the extra room. Back at Potter Manor, Harry had been thinking off and on for the past couple of days what to do with all the extra room opening the Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw suites allowed them. They had 2 years remaining of their studies within the castle, but did they actually need all that extra room for what was only a short period of time? No. Once he had a fair idea in his mind, he started to work it onto parchment, working from left to right. The Hufflepuff kitchen was superfluous. They didn't need that whole side of the combined suites, so the Hufflepuff kitchen would be closed off. The potions lab was huge and could be used for a lab if they needed a lab, other than for potions. Harry wasn't interested in a career in that field, nor did he think Daphne would seek that career path. The bedroom might come in handy, though, with its own bathroom, but the storage area was little more than a wide dead-end corridor. He could use it to connect it through to the Slytherin suite, but that would mean losing the storage area in the Slytherin suites, as it currently stood. The Ravenclaw suite was a whole different option. Harry thought it might be best to use Ravenclaw as their private suite and turn Gryffindor more fully over to the group. After all, Gryffindor was their preferred access, and their study area was in the suite living room. The stuff currently stored in the Slytherin storage area could be moved into the Ravenclaw potions lab, which was smaller. No, move his office to the Ravenclaw potions lab and use the old office as storage. Better. And the new library in Gryffindor could be linked into the Ravenclaw library, with that combined room now being an even bigger library. No need to keep the Ravenclaw kitchen, either. It could be left alone for now. So they didn't need a half bathroom on that floor either. So that end of the Ravenclaw suite could be shut off the same as the Hufflepuff suite. Effectively, they gained 2 extra master bedrooms and 2 living rooms with room to expand. It worked. A quick trip to Hogwarts and back, and he had all 4 elves on their way to making the changes he required. They'd be ready in plenty of time for the next school year. When he returned, Daphne asked, "So, we move into the Ravenclaw master suite, then?" Harry nodded and said yes. That way we can close off our private area within the suites, leaving the rest to the group. Plus, we still have access direct through to Gryffindor and Slytherin. "I like," she said. "I've left the kitchen in place and have asked the elves to modernize it, but I don't know if we'll ever use it. And I'm moving my office from Slytherin to Ravenclaw, so I don't have as far to travel." "It'll be wonderful, darling, I'm sure," she said, coming up behind him and wrapping her arms about him for a hug. During the summer break, both Harry and Daphne gave a lot of thought to their career choices. Thinking of importing Muggle devices made to work in wizarding homes, Daphne decided on a career as an enchantress with further study in business. That would require her to continue her studies in arithmancy and ancient runes, and take up the business 6th and 7th year elective. She was dropping astronomy, herbology, and history of magic, and keeping potions, charms, dagger, and transfiguration. Harry decided to do similar, but finally re-dropped Muggle studies, even if it had become more interesting. "No more late nights in the astronomy tower, love," he grinned at her. "No," she replied. "Another night of snuggling with my honey instead." They both knew they had done more than well enough on their OWLs, so submitted their applications for the classes they wanted to take as soon as they received the applications. Their results arrived on Saturday, 13th of July. They sat opposite one another at the informal dining table, each holding the thick envelope in their hands. "You first, sweetheart?" he asked. Daphne looked at him a moment or two before finally slitting the seal with her wand and opening the envelope. She withdrew the sheet to look. Both sitting in silence, Daphne held her results in her hand. Slowly, she looked up at Harry with a wide, beaming smile. "Well," he asked, "I know you did well. The question is just how well." She smiled and said, "Not until you open yours," and indicated the envelope he held in his hands. Harry sighed and used his wand to break the seal. He withdrew the sheet of parchment from within and read it. Ordinary wizarding level results. Pass grades. Outstanding. Exceeds expectations. Acceptable. Fail grades. Poor. Dreadful. Troll. Harry James Potter has achieved ancient runes, arithmancy, astronomy, charms, data orb ++ first, herbology orb, history of magic, Muggle studies, potions or transfiguration, 1820 possible OWS seal. He handed his to Daphne as she handed hers to him. Ordinary wizarding level results, pass grades, outstanding, exceeds expectations, acceptable. Fail grades, poor, dreadful. Troll, Daphne Ophelia Potter has achieved ancient runes, arithmancy, astronomy, charms, herbology, history of magic, potions, transfiguration, 1718 possible. Daphne, said Harry, pleased for her. You're brilliant, straight double O's, except for astronomy. That's brilliant. Ha! She said, you got the same for the same subjects. Plus, you took up Muggle studies and earned an ODL in that, and picked up a bonus for being top in our year for Dada. Well, with these scores, it looks like you're on your way, my dear Enchantress, Harry smiled. Now we just need to await confirmation of our classes and purchase our books. What now, though? She asked. Shall we go visit the others and see how well they did? A most superb plan, my dear, replied Harry. Let's. The entire group did well. Of course, they'd have to wait another year to hear how well Luna would do for her OWLs, but everyone was on their way towards their chosen careers. Tracy wanted to take the path of a healer, so would be apprenticing under Madame Pomfrey for her next 2 years before moving to St. Mungo's to complete her studies. She was taking arithmancy, dada, charms, herbology, potions, transfiguration and the healing pre-apprenticeship. Neville, who had been assisting Professor Sprout, was moving towards his apprenticeship under her for a mastery in herbology. He was taking ancient runes, charms, dada, herbology, potions, transfiguration, and the pre-apprenticeship for herbology. He'd also be undertaking a few teaching duties. Hannah still didn't know what she wanted to do, but knew it would involve running a business of some fashion. She'd also be happy helping Neville. She was taking arithmancy, business, charms, dada, herbology, potions, and transfiguration. Susan was looking for a ministry role somewhere. She was taking ancient runes, business, charms, dada, herbology, potions, and transfiguration. Hermione was looking to go into magical research. She'd go into the ministry if necessary, but was more interested in the private sector. She also pulled off the top student spot just because she picked up more Oduils than Harry did. But she also admitted it was because she took more classes. She was taking ancient runes, arithmancy, astronomy, dada, charms, potions, and transfiguration. Daves was going into business with his mother, a renowned potions mistress in Europe. For now, though, he was intending to complete his Newits and see what happened from there. Eddie Carmichael was looking towards the Auras, while Justin Finch-Fletchley was going to complete his Hogwarts education before moving to undertake his Muggle education. His family owned and operated several large companies. For the last 3, Harry and Daphne didn't visit them. Instead, they heard the news from their girlfriends. The book lists finally arrived on the 1st of August, the day after Harry's 16th birthday, shared with friends and family. So, the two contacted the others to see if they wanted to make a day of it, going to Diagon Alley to collect their books, increase their private supplies of parchment, ink, quills and fountain pens, and replace what of their uniforms they'd outgrown. Harry had hit another growth spurt, and was now hovering around 5'10" in height. He now considered he was of adult height, and hoped there wouldn't be too much growing left to do. So all his uniforms needed replacing. Daphne also insisted on another day of shopping. But in Muggle London, they met with Hermione, Susan, Tracy, and Luna. Hannah and Neville were going shopping as a couple and would be by the alley at another time. Justin was shopping with his parents, and Eddie with his other friends. After collecting their books and waving goodbye to their friends, Daphne dragged Harry off to Twilfit and Tattings for another fitting and another set of school robes, Wizengamot robes, and formal robes. Then it was over to Madame Malkin's for more robes, this time informal, casual, summer, and others. "Come on, Daphne," whined Harry. "Why so many?" "You need robes with the Potter crest, robes with the Potter, Gryffindor, and Slytherin crests, at least one set of robes with just the Gaunt crest, and robes with all 4, she said. "Now stop fussing, be a good boy and let us outfit you." They both knew Daphne was going to get her way, but Harry felt it was his place, as a male, to fuss during clothes shopping. However, he also knew he had to keep up appearances, so didn't make too big a deal of it. Their last stop was to visit the new shopfront of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. The outside of the building was, more often than not, a garish bright orange. However, the twins seemed to have found a way to permanently have it often change into other colors at odd times, and none of them were of the muted variety. They saw violet purple, fire engine red, lime green, canary yellow, rich blue, bright aqua, and indigo purple, to name a few. Inside, the boys had set the store up just as Harry suggested. To the left were racks between wall racks of stacked board games, boxed puzzles and jigsaws. An open area in the middle showed a half-completed small jigsaw puzzle and a couple of unboxed brain puzzles. But the right was set up with shelving and racks filled with joke products, both magical and muggle, and the place was crowded. Harry and Daphne were trying to make their way through the crowds, looking for the twins, when voices from above caught their attention. "Harry! Daphne!" called the twins. Looking up, Harry saw both standing on a flight of stairs, dressed identically in bright orange trousers and blue shirts with khaki-colored long frock coats over the top. It was almost as eye-watering as the facade outside. Looking up at them, Harry grinned back and waved. "Come on up," said one. "Mind the rope," said the other. Holding tightly to Daphne's hand and leading her, Harry made his way over to the bottom of the stairs. He removed the rope that acted as a barrier to the stairs and guided Daphne up as he stepped through and refastened the rope. With Daphne leading, he followed the twins up the stairs. Stepping onto the top step, he suddenly heard all noise from below disappear. Seeing the expression on his face, one of the twins said, "A silencing privacy ward." "Brother Bill set it up for us," said the other. Looking around, Harry noticed they were in the private living area of the twins. "I really like what you've done with the place," he said. "Thank you," they said together. "Any problem with your mother concerning," said Harry before gesturing around with his arm. "This?" "Lots," said one, with clear glee. "She went right spare," said the other. "Until we showed her we had financial backing," said the first. "Now she's proud of us," said the second. "Kind of frightening, that is," said the first, a little disconsolate. Harry grinned at Daphne before turning back to the twins. "I'm glad for you both," he said. "It certainly looks popular," said Daphne, looking back down the stairs. "Oh, it is. A crowd awaits every morning. And we have to force them out the door each evening. It's wonderful," they sighed in unison. After a quick show around their private apartment, the shop floor and the back room, the twins demanded Harry promise he'd let them take them both out to the factory when they had the time. Both Harry and Daphne promised, but said they didn't know when they'd have the time just yet, but would when they could. The other surprise over the summer was learning Sirius was finally settling down with one witch, while Remus was now dating young Nymphadora Tonks, a black, who was a year out of the Oral Academy. Harry and Sirius both wanted to have fun twigging their honorary uncle and brother, but wisely decided not to let the old wolf break the relationship off. Just before returning for their 6th year at Hogwarts, Daphne and Harry were called to Greengrass Estates for a house meeting. There they learned that young Colin had formally requested of Cygnus the right to court Astoria's hand in marriage. The view was young Colin had done everything right, and even warned his parents that there was a high likelihood of a betrothal contract being involved. He even provided them with the information about them and why they existed, information he was assisted in discovering through his perfect attendance figures at Harry and Daphne's etiquette club. Because Harry knew Colin came from a lower-class Muggle family, his father was a milkman, and his mother took short-term jobs while the boys were at school, he offered to buy the betrothal rings. Colin was no fool, too full of wasteful pride. He accepted, so together, he and Colin went to the Potter family jeweler and found a lovely matching pair. However, when Colin asked, he flatly refused to let the boy know how much they cost. He thought the boy would faint again. The betrothal contract, this time not signed in blood, was signed between both families the day before the Hogwarts Express made its run up to Scotland, and Colin immediately got down on one knee and proposed the Muggle way. Astoria, of course, accepted. The wedding would be held once they both reached 17 years of age, but there was no time frame in place for when it was supposed to happen beyond that. As per the conditions of the contract, they could stay betrothed for decades if they wanted to, or they could individually or mutually agree to cancel the contract as long as such cancellation occurred before the wedding. The wedding would make the contract firm. The only reason all parties agreed to even have a betrothal contract was so that Colin then fell under the protection of Greengrass House, and it would stop the purebloods continuing to try and court Cygnus for Astoria's hand. She was now off the market. Cygnus and Isabel were happy with it because Astoria was happy with it. No one's opinion other than young Colin's, Astoria's and both parents mattered. Back at school after the 1st of September, and Harry was showing the group around the modified combined apartment. "Wow," said Neville. "I thought it was amazing last year, but this is astounding." Said Daphne. "An extra 2 bedrooms, so no more sleeping on couches, an extra 2 living rooms cum study areas, a much improved and expanded library with many tomes not seen in a great many years, our bedroom no longer, only half a flight of stairs and a single door away from the then only study area, and plenty of room remaining to expand when and if necessary. "I like the decor," said Hermione simply. "Coral in Gryffindor, mint in Slytherin, custard in Hufflepuff, and baby blue in Ravenclaw. Nice and modern colors, wall-to-wall carpeting in the dry areas, and a real homey sort of feel for the place." Turning to look at Daphne, she smirked and said, "You could easily raise children here if you were of a mind." Harry immediately blushed while Daphne just smiled a little. "Children are a definite future for the Potters. But I very much doubt it will be here when we start having them. Although," she mused, turning back to Harry, "I can see Harry coming back here to teach Dirde charms or transfiguration in future. We just might have children to bring back with us if teaching's in Harry's future." The 6th year flowed a lot easier than the 5th. ODL year. They had fewer classes each, but the assignments were longer and required much more detail. The study area, library and potions labs received a lot of work. On not more than a few occasions, they also trooped up to the 7th floor to use the very old texts they knew they could find there, and down to the school library to use the newer ones that had been bought the summer previously. The study area within the suites was often occupied by at least one of the group. Now that they were spread across various classes, it was not often when all of them would be there. And now that the twins had finally graduated and were running their new business, the group lacked their constant nattering presences as well. For their etiquette club, Harry and Daphne were training up Colin and Astoria to take over starting the next year. This year they'd assist and even run meetings on their own. Then, 2 years later, they'd train up the next to take it over. Both Potters were happy with their plans for the club to continue to exist and even flourish after they'd graduated. The year flowed smoothly for Harry, Daphne, and the others in the group. At least, academically, it did. Susan ended up very effectively dumping Eddie Carmichael in November. When Harry asked her why, she told him it was because he had stopped being a gentleman. He got the full story from Daphne a couple days later. It seems young Mr. Carmichael developed a strong desire to get his hands into Susan's upper robes and play with her. Quite substantial, girls. It even got to the point where he nearly forced her when she tagged him with a right cross that broke his jaw. And if that wouldn't put him into Madame Pomfrey's care, the hexing he got from the feisty little red head certainly would have done the trick. However, Susan was soon on the arm of fellow Hufflepuff, Ernie Macmillan. This time, Harry made sure the boy got the shovel talk and advised to take it easy with her because of what Harry told him was a very emotionally draining breakup due a betrayal of trust with the Carmichael boy. Hermione's relationship with Justin Finch Fletchley, founded in October, was back on again during the Christmas break, founded again in early February, and was back on again when he practically abased himself to her on Valentine's Day in the Great Hall and sang her a love song in front of everyone in the key of off. They remained together for the rest of the school year. "And you took him back, why?" asked Harry. If he was willing to go to the length of completely embarrassing himself in front of the entire school, she replied, "I know his love for me is strong enough for us to weather hardships life may, and probably will bring." Harry hugged her and said, "I'm happy for you." He then held her at arm's length and said, "But you tell him from me if he hurts you again, him, me, and my shovel are going to take a walk out into the Forbidden Forest." She smiled back with her eyes twinkling and said, "I hope you don't mind, but I've already told him that." Harry just snorted in amusement and hugged her again. "You're the best protectee a lord can ask for, you know that." "I do," she replied, "and you're the best little brother a girl could ask for." As she turned and walked away with a bit of a smirk, he called, "Hey, I'm not little. Just ask Daff." Harry, his wife, who had overheard, exclaimed and blushed. Turning to her, he said, "Well, I'm not, am I?" He hated how his question sounded almost whining. The year passed, and they entered their 7th confident in their abilities. This was the newer year, when they called the wizarding test to graduate Hogwarts, nearly excruciating. They weren't making an idle claim. 5 to 7 feet of parchment for various assignments, classes of casting that left them exhausted, physically, mentally, and magically with a norm. But get through it. They did. During the Christmas break, Justin and Hermione came to the decision they would both attend Muggle education once Hogwarts was over, because neither wanted to risk being apart for that long. Hermione was putting her career on hold to better her education, and the money now flowing into the vaults for Dagworth Granger House were more than sufficient for her to pursue a dream of gaining a Muggle undergraduate degree minimum. And Justin was also from a well-to-do family and had the same sort of finances behind him to do the same thing. The Finch-Fletchleys came from what is considered old money, similar to the noble and ancient houses. Tracy and Blaise had a right royal bust up, but both also realized it was from the stress of study rather than anything else. So both got back together, promising each other to vent their anger on dueling dummies in the come-and-go room before unleashing their tongues at one another. They often fought side by side with their dueling. Harry walked up to Blaise in the Great Hall from behind one day carrying his shovel and tapped the boy on the shoulder. When Blaise turned around, he saw Harry standing there brandishing the garden implement. "Shovel, Mr. Zabini," growled Harry. "Shovel, Merlin, Harry." "I," said the boy, before he was interrupted by a clearly angry Tracy. Harry didn't know she was already in the hall. "Harry James Potter," she screeched, standing up from where she was sitting. "You will not harm." Harry handed the shovel to Blaise by literally tossing it to the boy, and bolted from the hall. Thankfully, no curses or hexes flew due to the many young students already in the hall, and he made it out without harm. Only Blaise's and a few other students' laughter chased him out. Susan and Ernie's relationship bloomed too. And in their 7th year, Eddie surpassed Harry's Valentine's Day efforts by giving her the whole day as one long romantic endeavor before, in the evening, dropping to one knee and proposing to her. She bawled her eyes out, and Ernie looked gutted before she finally threw herself into his arms, sending them both sprawling to the floor, and accepted. Macmillan was a noble and ancient house, and Ernie was the oldest son of the second son of Lord Ian Macmillan, ex-head of the School Board of Governors. Madam Bones and Lord Macmillan soon had a betrothal contract drawn up and signed where the first son would carry the name Macmillan and the second would carry the name Bones, unless the son of the oldest son had a son first, in which case the oldest son of Ernie and Susan would carry the name Bones for line continuation purposes. Susan would also retain the name Bones. Aunt Amelia was over the moon. Luster Moody found himself resoundingly kissed when he walked into her office the day of the signing to just see how his favorite student was doing, and immediately stunned her and scanned her for potions and other mind-altering substances. When Master Shacklebolt walked in and found her bounded to a chair and unconscious, he renervated her and found out what had happened, and ended up having a giggling fit that morphed into roaring laughter. However, Aunt Amelia's good mood could not be shaken, even after being so surprisingly stunned and bound. Moody stomped off, muttering about young chits getting all girly with him, and barked at a poor, unsuspecting Cadet Aurore who was passing by, how it just wasn't right. Neville had already asked Harry to be his best man, who immediately accepted, and, over the course of the next few months, whittled down his choices to Blaise and Ernie to be his other 2 groomsmen. He was happy to just have Harry stand with him, but he, just like Harry a couple years earlier, was outvoted by the bride. He would have 3 stand with him, to match the maid of honor, and 2 bridesmaids Hannah would have, or else, and they both knew Hannah had a temper when she was properly riled. Susan and Ernie were getting married in June, and Neville and Hannah in August. Susan would be taking up the headship the noble and most ancient House of Bones immediately after graduation, as she would have already attained her majority, while Neville and Hannah were holding off on their nuptials until Neville attained his majority and took up his head and lordship for the noble and most ancient House of Longbottom. As they headed into the final weeks before their annuity exams, Harry began setting aside a bit of time to plan Neville's stag party. He was working in his office when he was interrupted by a knock on his open door. Looking up, he saw Hannah walk in as Daphne smirked and walked away. "Lady Hannah," he began, before she cut him off. "Don't start, Harry," she snapped. Then her voice dropped to an ominous pitch. "I know it is your responsibility to organize a bucks party for Neville." Before he could say anything, she just glared at him and continued, "On the day of our wedding, everything is to be perfect. You will ensure Neville awaits me before the minister as I enter the wedding marquee. He is to be sober. He is to be alert. He is to be standing proudly as I approach. He will not be marked, missing hair, anything but his natural color, or suffering from any other affliction that will make me angry. If I am angry, or if I have reason to be angry, the Potter line ends with you. Have I made myself perfectly clear to you, Lord Potter?" Harry gulped and nodded. "Thank you, Harry," she said before leaving again. "Damn," thought Harry. "Now, what am I going to do?" With a sigh, he started crossing ideas off his list. I was really looking forward to that one too, and that one, leaving him potioned up with stamina and pepper-up potions. Naked in the middle of a villa enclave in France was such a good idea too. During the couple of weeks leading up to the exams, Harry and the others took a stressed-out Hermione to Madame Pomfrey, who immediately forced the girl into bed with a dreamless sleep potion. The next day, a much better Hermione came down for breakfast. That's when Harry and Daphne ordered the girl to move into one of the bedrooms in the owner's apartments. During that time, they found out Messi was a fair masseuse, and the Slytherin elf then took to giving them all back and neck massages before they each headed for bed. Harry had told Daphne he found the best form of relaxation was a good and proper shag, to which she replied, "If it wasn't for the fact I believe the same, I'd accuse you of just wanting to get into my knickers, Lord Potter." "Oh no," he piously replied, "I always want to get into your knickers, but each time I do, I know how much better I feel the next day." As exams were held, the combined owners' apartments ended up with a full house, all bedrooms full. Harry and Daphne were in their room in Ravenclaw, Tracy and Blaise in her room in Slytherin, Hannah and Susan in the room next door. Neville and Ernie each had a bedroom where the Slytherin kitchen was. Hermione and Luna shared the Gryffindor master bed, and Justin slept down in the Hufflepuff master bedroom. With exams finally over, the now much extended group of 11 thought of partying, but found they were all just so relieved. It was over. The party fizzled. Instead, they all headed for bed and slept in the next day. A late breakfast for the group was in the Gryffindor kitchen. The dining table had been extended much earlier for sittings of the size. Harry preferred to sit alongside his wife, but on these sorts of days had to sit at the end while Daphne sat to his left. Everyone else just sat where they wanted. Remaining at table after their breakfast dishes were cleared away by the sweets house elves, they talked. "I'm going to miss you," said a sad Luna. "Neville and Hannah will still be here, dear Luna," said Harry, "and I believe others will be coming and going at times during the year." "I know," she sighed. "And I'm grateful Neville and Hannah will be staying, but he will be an adjunct professor and an apprentice under Madam Sprout. I'm the only student of our group left." "I'll be staying too, Luna," said Hannah. "I'll be living here with Neville. Harry's letting us use these wonderful suites for the year, and we'll be sleeping in the Gryffindor master. You'll always be welcome to come and stay when you feel you want to." Looking back at the other girl with a grateful smile, Luna softly said, "Thank you." Harry was going to be helping his wife set up Daphne's business in enchanting Muggle-based goods for the wizarding home, while he would also be working towards stripping the laws away that forbade enchanting Muggle items. Hermione and Justin were soon to be off to a specialist facility to tailor their education to allow them access into King's College at the University of London, a quite prestigious research-based university that would work well with Hermione's intention to go into spell and other magics research. Blaise was going to remain in magical Britain to be nearer Tracy, whom he still hadn't made an honest woman, and was setting up a magical Britain-based business for his mother's potions business. Tracy, of course, was heading to St. Mungo's to begin the next phase of becoming a healer. Susan was going to work in the ministry, but wouldn't say what she was doing. They'd all already figured out she was going to work for the Unspeakables. Ernie would be working with Harry and Daphne. Though she still had a year of Hogwarts to go, Luna was going to research her magical creatures and write better books on them. She'd already written to and been invited by Newt Scamander to work on her research. Colin was looking forward to starting up his own independent photography company, and Astoria was looking towards working with him in that business. Harry had offered to spot the boy, the young man now, the start-up capital, but had been beaten to the offer by Cygnus. As far as Harry was concerned, the boy would soon be family, so he'd help in any way he could. One of those ways was to give the boy free rent on one of his vacant shops in Diagon Alley that had an upstairs apartment. That would be his wedding present to the newlywed couple. Susan and Ernie's wedding was as beautiful as she wanted. Even the weather was on her side. Ernie was real anti until he took one look at her. Then he was as still as a statue. His best man, Wayne Hopkins, had to physically reach out and turn him as Susan came up and stood alongside him. That made the friends snicker. He even had to be prompted by the jab of a finger to the small of his back by Wayne to answer the obligatory questions. Thankfully, it didn't upset Susan in the slightest. 6 weeks later, and it was Neville and Hannah's turn. This time Harry, as best man, didn't need to prompt the sandy-haired young man as he, the recently inducted Lord Longbottom, appeared almost eager to get on with it. Late the next morning, Harry received a rather errate flu call from Hannah. Someone, and Harry blamed his godfather, had written on young Lord Longbottom's stomach the words, "The Wand of Destiny," with an arrow pointing down to his wedding tackle, and no amount of magic could remove it. Harry had to tell her he thought it was mercurochrome, a muggle antibacterial solution that sinks into the skin, staining it, and that it would fade away over a couple of days. Then he blocked access to Hannah through the Potter Manor flu for the next week, just in case. Harry and Daphne were finally able to get the legislation banning the sale of Muggle-enchanted devices overturned and had their shop up and running within Diagon Alley within a week. Ernie was their first employee and loved the work. They were very careful with what they were selling, so items like refrigerators, televisions, Muggle radios, and similar were allowed. These devices all operated as if they were connected to electricity. No item was sold that would not pass casual inspection within a Muggle household. After working to get the business operational for 5 years, Harry studied for his mastery in Dada, while Daphne did the same for ancient runes. Then Harry moved on to a mastery in charms. Eventually he took over the Dada professorship at Hogwarts, but demanded and got permission to link the flu in his office to his office in Potter Manor. It was a secure connection. Saturday, 14th June 2008, Potter Manor. The young man stepped out of the fireplace into the parlor to be greeted by a green-eyed, blonde-haired toddler running from the room, screaming while a small boy of about 6 or 7 chased after her. "Prim," the boy called to the toddler. "Prim, stop." As the young man grinned after the two kids, he turned back to be prepared to catch the clearly very pregnant blonde-haired lady stepping through with her arms full of a toddler of her own. Banishing the veil she had covering the child's face, the young man made sure the lady and himself were cleared of soot. "And just what are you grinning about, Neville Francis?" asked the blonde-haired lady. "Young Sirius chasing his baby sister out of here, my love," he chuckled as he took the toddler from his wife's arms. "No," whined the toddler. "Down, Daddy, down." "All right, Franklin," said Neville, lowering the child to the floor. With the child standing on its own 2 feet, Neville pointed to a doorway and said, "Sirius and Primrose went that way." "Thank you, Daddy," said the child half-ang before it ran out through the same door. Turning back to his wife, Neville smiled and asked, "You know where they'll be, don't you?" "Kitchen," said Hannah. "Harry'll be annoying his house elves by cooking." Neville grinned back and escorted his wife through to the kitchen. Entering, they saw that they were nearly the last to arrive. Harry was working at the oven talking with Colin, while Daphne was sitting at the large dining table talking to Susan, Tracy, Tonks and Astoria. "Hi, folks," said Neville as Hannah went over to the other ladies. "Nev," said Harry, turning to look. "Butterbeers and ales are in the fridge. Help yourself. Hi, Hannah." Harry greeted Hannah as she sat with the others. As Neville walked over to see what delights Harry was whipping up and opening the fridge to pull out an ale, he asked Harry, "Where's Remus and Blaze?" "Out the back with Sirius Senior," said Harry. "They're trying to teach Teddy how to fly a broom." "Well, if Sirius is here, where's his wife Connie?" asked Neville. "She'll be along in a little while," replied Colin, as Harry was checking the contents of the oven. "She should have just finished her shift at St. Mungo's and will have gone to pick James Jr. up from her mother's." replied Harry over his shoulder. Neville heard a squeal at the table and turned to look. Hannah was excitedly hugging a blushing Daphne. "Hi, Daff," he said. "What's going on?" Tracy answered with a gleeful smirk. "That messy-haired best friend of yours got Daphne pregnant again. Twins." A gobsmacked Neville spun back to Harry, who had turned around with a pleased grin on his face, and exclaimed, "Harry, mate, congratulations," and shook his hand. A loud ding was heard, signalling the front door had opened as someone came in. Harry looked up for a moment and said, "That'll be Hermione and Justin." "Where is everyone?" they heard Hermione call. "Auntie Manny, Uncle Jas, they're in the kitchen," called the voice of Sirius Jr., Harry and Daphne's oldest. A few moments later, a hesitant Hermione entered with Justin right behind. The first thing the girls noticed was the baby bulge Hermione was sporting. With the squeal of glee from all the witches, Hermione was dragged over to the table. "How long? Do you know what sex it is yet? When's it due?" Harry took one long look and turned to Neville. "Neville, get my shovel." "Now," Harry, said Justin, backing up a little. Hermione's head snapped around to glare at Harry from where she was conversing with Astoria. "Harry James Potter, you leave my husband alone. We're married. I'm sure you know what was going to happen sooner or later." Harry impudently grinned back. "So," he said, "I see you've taken serious what was poked at you in fun." "Harry," exclaimed Daphne, "you stop that this instant, or it's the couch for you." Both Neville and Colin were chuckling away. Harry turned to Justin and grinned. "Congrats, Juds. Ilo and butterbeers are in the fridge. Help yourself." Thanks," said Justin, going to the fridge. "Are we the last to arrive?" "Yep," replied Harry. "Blaze, Sirius and Remus are out back teaching James Jr. how to fly a broom. The other carpet commandos are running around here somewhere, and Ernie's running the shop. How goes the research?" "Good," he replied, pleased to have been asked. "I think we're really onto something. I don't think we're ready to make an announcement of it any time soon, though, but it's promising." "Good to hear," said Harry. "A permanent cure for lycanthropy will go a long way to helping Neville, Sirius, Cygnus, Susan, Hermione and I to stop the bigotry directed towards those who suffer from that accursed affliction." "You still don't have the votes?" asked Tracy, from where she was listening. "No, but we're close," replied Neville. "Saturday, 16th June 2018, New Dagworth Granger Manor. The Potters arrived at New Dagworth Granger Manor Muggle style. That is, they arrived by car. Walking to the front door, Harry was about to knock when Dobby opened the door for them. "Dobbs," exclaimed Harry, "good to see you." "And you, sir?" grinned the little elf. "Master and mistress are in the parlour with their other guests." "Uncle Howie," said a little bushy-haired missile who flew into Harry's legs, the younger version of a grapple hug, as he tried to step inside. "Oof," he exclaimed, looking down to pick the little 4-year-old up. "Hello, Gwen," he softly said to her, Hermione and Justin's youngest, giving her a cuddle. "Mummy's in the parlour with Auntie Story, Auntie Tracy, Auntie Connie, Auntie Tonks, Auntie Luna, Auntie Susan, Auntie Hannah." As the little girl rattled off the names, Harry carried her into the parlour. He was followed by Daphne and his brood of 5. "Daddy's outside with Uncle Padfu, Uncle Mooney, Uncle Colin, Uncle Nev, Uncle Blaze, Uncle," continued the little girl. "Gwen," said Hermione, interrupting her youngest, "Uncle Harry knows their names. Now let him go, so he can say hello to his friends." Harry put the girl down as she said, "Okay, Mummy." Then she turned to look up at Harry, and, with the almost exact expression Hermione got when she was trying to be stern, said, "You go play with your Fods and Zerka, hockey. The ladies are talking in here." With a snort, he replied, "Yes, my lady, this humble servant thanks you for your permission to depart your presence," and bowed low. Turning, he kissed Daphne on her cheek, and cheekily asked, "May I, my lady?" Daphne rolled her eyes and said, "Get and take this lot with you. No doubt they're out there on their brooms." Harry grinned to her and turned to his kids. "Okay, Team Potter, let's go show them how to fly, shall we?" He looked at the smiling faces of Sirius Edgier Jr., Primrose the twins, Charles and Hadrian, and the youngest, Monica, which kept his promise to his mother-in-law. The 6 of them headed out the back as Harry pulled the half-dozen shrunken lightning bolt brooms out of his pocket. "Professor Potter," exclaimed Wendell, Justin and Hermione's third. "Now, Wendell," said Harry. "We're not in school. You already know you can call me Harry during the summer." "Yes, sir," said the boy, "but Mum disagrees with you." "And you don't want to upset your mum," said Harry. The boy grinned back and said, "No, sir." "Smart lad," said Harry. "Hey, Pop," called Sirius. "The kids are just about to form teams for lightning Quidditch. Get your litter up in the air." Not needing any further encouragement, the 5 kids took to the air on their brooms. Walking over to see his godfather, Harry smiled and said, "It's good to see you, you old dog." Sunday, 1st September, many, many decades later, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Sitting in his hover chair atop the astronomy tower, Headmaster Harry Potter looked out across the grounds of Hogwarts and watched as the sun set over the mountains on the other side of Black Lake. He heard a slight cough from behind and a voice he knew so well. "Headmaster, the train will be arriving soon." The Hogwarts Express, now a sleek crimson-colored magical levitation train, shot along so fast that the train ride now only took a little over 3 hours to make its journey from New King's Cross Station to Hogsmeade. "Thank you, Gwen," said Harry. Harry turned his chair to look into the lined face of his deputy, Professor Gwendolen Zabini Finch-Fletchley. "How much she looks like her late mother, Hermione," he thought with a mental sigh. "I shall be down shortly," he said. "I wish to see the train arrive." "Yes, Headmaster," replied Gwen, looking back. Though a nasty curse to the back had robbed him of the use of his legs during his unspeakable days, Harry never let it bother him too much. He sighed once, grumbled a bit, and got to work on developing a wheelchair that could hover, was powered off the user's inherent magic, and could be moved by little more than intent alone. It was the most current advanced version of that, now developed by Potter Enchantment's R&D section, than he sat upon this night. Gwen looked over and saw, no matter the headmaster's advanced age, he still sat with his back straight and proud, his hair still messy, but now completely white, clean-shaven because Daphne preferred him that way, and wearing frameless and armless spectacles for his far-sightedness, affixed to his face only by the bridge of his nose and the use of microscopic runes. "Have I told you lately how much you mean to me?" he asked her. With a fond smile, the old witch replied, "All the time, Headmaster, all the time." "Good," he said. "One can never be told enough how much their service is appreciated." Gwen made a slight bow before she turned and descended the stairs back into the castle. At the bottom she turned back, smiled fondly at where she knew the headmaster's chair to be, and said to herself, "You're such a good man, Nonka Howie." As she had descended the stairs, Harry silently turned his chair back to the view over the edge of the lake to the station, and thought about his life. His children all grown, children of their own, and their children's children. He thought of his late wife, Daphne, dead these past few years, quite a few now, and yearned to once more feel her lips upon his. Their love for one another never diminished. He still held it in his heart even now. Of his friends, only Neville still survived. He'd retired as chief warlock a few years ago, and was happy working in his little greenhouse in the solarium one of his grandsons had built onto the back of Longbottom Hall for him. Hannah had passed, even before Daphne. He'd passed on all his lordships a long time ago, when he wanted to devote his time fully to being a headmaster. Sirius James Edgej was now Lord Potter. Primrose Isabel Pip married Neville's oldest, Franklin. Yet again, the close alliance between Potter and Longbottom shone through, and was now Lady Longbottom. The twins, Charles Harfang and Hadrian Cygnus, were Lord Gryffindor and Lord Slytherin, respectively. And Monica, his precious baby, married Daniel Finch-Fletchley, Hermione and Justin's second child. Surprising Colin and Astoria both, he passed on the title of Lord Greengrass to their eldest son, Harrison, named after him. Harry the younger was so overcome by the gesture he couldn't even bring himself to thank his uncle for almost a week. Harry the senior thought it was one of his greatest pranks. It was also his last. As Colin and Tori lived at Greengrass Estate at the time, he thought it was most wise of him to hand it to the man. Once he'd brushed the cobwebs off the tite, he'd quickly made the name Greengrass again one of power within the Wizengamot. He sat there thinking about them all, what they, especially his school friends, had gone through, and thought back all those many years about the time he'd spent in this very castle as a student with them. Remus had passed first. Though Justin and Hermione's people finally managed to find a cure for lycanthropy, the long years of monthly transformations had taken a toll on his body. He died quite young for a magical, about 15 years later. Of course, then went Wendell and Monica, non-mags. Their passing had a profound impact on them all. Then Gran, both Neville and Harry were gutted, but their wives pulled them both through it. Sirius held on for quite a while. The love of his wife, children, and friends helped him through the loss of his close childhood friend. But when the time came, he went willingly on to his next great adventure, surrounded by all those who loved him and could make it to visit with him in his last remaining hours. He even seemed to be looking forward to it. The Marauders will be reunited, he smiled. Cygnus, Isabel, and Aunt Amelia all passed within a few years of each other. Then they had quite a few years before they lost other loved ones. But then they all started to pass. Barely a month seemed to go by before other friends and acquaintances moved on. Eventually only he and Neville remained. He sighed in remembrance. He missed them all. Snapping out of his maudlin thoughts, he looked back to Hogsmeade. With the mountains in the way, twilight was quite short. The stars were all out and twinkling, so early. He was looking at the heavens and trying to remember what the stars were all called again. He'd lost his perfect memory quite some time ago. Now he knew what it was like to forget. He was tired. He closed his eyes to rest for a moment while he awaited the train. One memory he never forgot, would never forget, was the scent of his wife. He could even smell it now. Had enough yet? He heard, just as he felt his chair gently settle to the ground. It shouldn't have done that. It was powered off his magic and remained hovering as long as he sat upon it, after all, and was similar to the magic used in the maglev train. He idly thought that might have been a problem. He opened his eyes to see a vision. His wife was leaning with her bum against the rail of the tower, smiling, her legs crossed at the ankles, and her arms folded across her chest. She looked as she did when she was about 21. "Daff?" he asked, a little confused. "I asked if you'd had enough yet," she asked, uncrossing her legs and dropping her arms to her side as she stood up straight. "It's time," he asked. "Yes, sweetheart," she replied, gliding over to stand next to him. "I wanted to see the train arrive," he sighed. She smiled and pointed. "Look," she said. He looked to Hogsmeade just as he saw the express arrive in all its glory. He said. "Beautiful, isn't it?" "Yes," she wistfully replied, "our greatest invention." They both watched the train for a few moments, just as students started to alight from its carriages. "Come on," she said. "Everyone's waiting." "Yes, of course," he said, and stood up, taking a half-step forward. Nothing hurt, now, no aches or pains. He turned about and saw his body sitting in the chair. His eyes were closed and he had that silly half-crooked smile on his lips. "Minister Black is going to be most put out at chose today to up and die on her," said Harry. "She was supposed to be heading for that ICW conference for heads of government in Nice in 3 days. He turned his head and took one more look at the students disembarking. "She'll survive," said Daphne with a light chuckle. Turning to his wife, he kissed her and asked, "Where to?" "Home," she said, holding her hand out to take his. "I'm here to guide you home." "Excellent," he said. Hold his wife's hand, he felt himself lift and begin to ascend. "I've missed you," he quietly said. "And I, you, my darling," she replied. "Do you still love me?" he cheekily asked. "Then, now, and for eternity," she replied with a smile. As he was surrounded by a bright light, he heard his godfather, in his animagus form, happily barking his head off in welcome.